cut 30% of its management and support staff, or about 5,100 jobs, as it continues to shrink operations in response to the dramatic decline in travel brought on by the coronavirus pandemic. Among airline shares today, American down 6.7%, UAL down 4.6%, Delta down 1.4%, and Southwest Airlines also down 1.4%. Job cuts at Boeing. Boeing shares are higher, though today the playmaker is resuming production of its 737 MAX jetliner while working with regulators to end a year-long global grounding. Boeing shares up now by 2%. Recapping, S&P up by 0.9%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash.
You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week on this Thursday. Carol Massar along with my co-host Jason Kelly. So a group of super forecasters say a COVID-19 vaccine is still a ways off. In today's Business Week Economics editor Peter Coy joins us along with the CEO of that group that pulls all of those super forecasters together. He's Warren Hatch, CEO of Good Judgment. It's a company that maintains a global network of forecasters to make predictions for clients based on publicly available evidence. Peter's on the phone in New Jersey, Warren in New York City. Peter, set the stage for us. I love this story.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, everybody wants to know this. When are we going to have a vaccine? It's a question on everybody's mind now. So I got a pitch, actually, from a PR person about Good Judgment, a company I was aware of, but I hadn't really looked at their website to see what they were saying about COVID-19. I was really curious. And, I was surprised, actually, when I saw the results, how pessimistic they really were. It seemed like they're on the pessimistic end of the stuff you're hearing, but I thought, well, maybe they're right, and all the, companies and epidemiologists and government officials are just champing at the bit a bit too much, getting a little over-optimistic. I said, this sounds like a story, so put something out.
So, Warren, tell us about it. And by the way, I think super forecaster is one of the greatest descriptions that I've ever heard. Like to title, to have the title like, yeah, I'm a super forecaster. Like, do you actually have that on your business card, or is that just something you sort of throw around at cocktail parties? I'm just giving you a hard time, but it is cool.
Well, I'll tell you.
Do you have a cape? That's what we want to know. Do you have a cape?
Well, I think there is a cape on one of our stock photo images that we've used in the past. And I could tell you that the term super forecaster, super forecasters themselves are a little uneasy with that. But now that I'm CEO of the commercial spinoff, boy, I sure recognize the value of the term. I'm all for it. Putting it on my business card is a great idea.
So what did you find? Help us understand, as you guys dug into this, because as Peter, rightly said, this is running, counter to what a lot of us are, hearing and reading from maybe more optimistic folks.
Yeah, so the way we approach these kinds of questions for clients and government and private sector and finances is we think in terms of probabilities. So rather than saying, well, a vaccine is unlikely or likely or absolutely for sure, those sorts of things, but they're really hard to track, to evaluate, to interpret. So we use probabilities, numbers that you can compare across different kinds of questions. So when will the U.S. economy recover? We're less optimistic than my old friend Steve Risciuto. But also, when is a vaccine going to be widely available? And then we create ranges so we can get a little bit more nuance. What's the probability that a vaccine will be in wide distribution by the end of this year? Right now, the super forecasters have pretty low odds in the single digits that that's going to occur. Now, that doesn't mean it won't. In a world of probabilities, if it's low, we may see it. And by may, I mean like 6% probability. So it's not zero, but the probabilities are much higher for a vaccine in wide circulation about a year from now. And I can also say that the pessimism or the skepticism is less than what it was. Because one of the things the super forecasters will do is follow the news flow like we all do, and then quantify the impact of that news flow on their forecasts. And so some of the news that we have been seeing about possible successes in some of the vaccine research has been reflected in that. Now, they're not seeing much movement in the probability that we'll get a vaccine by the end of this year, but a vaccine by this time next year has moved up.
Well, it's so fascinating. You know, Peter, I feel like Jason likes to make references like this is going to be in billions, but I could see this being in billions, you know, down the road. It's like, you know, figuring out what's the likelihood of something happening or not happening. But I do think in a world where I was just in a conversation with a bunch of CEOs, there's just no data, and folks are saying you've got to throw out the old data points because they just don't apply to the future. You know, this kind of information can be very useful.
Yeah, I mean, information, it's not like this is the answer. I mean,
right.
The Good Judgment Incorporated has had its share of mistakes, too. And when I talked to Philip Tetlock, who's a co-founder, University of Pennsylvania professor, and he was the first to say, look, it's rare that we're going to be way on one end, everybody's going to be way on the other, and we'll be right and they'll be wrong. But on the other hand, if you're right 52% of the time, in the stock market, for example, you could make a lot of money. So you don't. Again, the measure of success is not perfection. It's just having a little bit of an edge. And I'm willing to say that maybe these people, just because of their disciplined way of thinking, the fact that they're not emotionally tied to a particular answer or financially invested in a particular answer, that they just want to make the very best estimate, makes them worth listening to.
Yeah.
Well, and Warren, we should note, your background is in hedge funds. I mean, you helped co-found a hedge fund. You understand the research element. And so from an investment perspective, exactly the framing that Peter just laid out is, I think, important for people to keep in mind, right?
I couldn't agree more. And I wish I knew 20 years ago when I got started in Morgan Stanley what I know now. Because there are all these wonderful tools that can give you just a little bit of an edge here and there. And it's these little things that when you add them all together can add up to a pretty significant outperformance relative to your peers. And that's what it's all about.
All right. Well, we really appreciate both of your time. Warren Hatch is the CEO of Good Judgment, joining us on the phone from New York City. Read more about him and his firm. He's a super forecaster. You can follow him on Twitter at Super Forecaster. Peter Coy wrote the story in Business Week online. Mm-hmm. Peter Coy, of course, economics editor for Bloomberg Business Week. Couple headlines we want to hit on the way out, Carol.
Yeah, I want to hit the one on Cisco Systems. In advanced talks to buy software company, Thousand Eyes for nearly $1 billion, according to those in the know. Cisco could announce a deal for that company as soon as Thursday. So we're watching that one, Jason.
Can I hit another headline that makes me sad?
Yeah. What?
Boston Marathon canceled in September. It had been rescheduled from April, Patriots Day, till September. The mayor of Boston announcing on Twitter that they will not hold that race this year. There'll be some sort of virtual race. It's a huge bummer. I'm really, really upset for anybody who had qualified to run. Let's get to Bob Moon now. He's got world and national headlines. Hey, Bob.
Jason, thank you. A dire warning from the United Nations today about the ongoing threat posed by the COVID-19 pandemic. Secretary General Antonio Guterres warned world leaders the pandemic will cause unimaginable devastation and suffering around the world, with historic levels of hunger and famine and up to 1.6 billion people unable to earn a living unless action is taken now. He called for immediate and collective action in several critical areas, including enhancing global financial liquidity, providing debt relief, and special focus on tax evasion, money laundering, and corruption. The House of Representatives passed a bipartisan bill to make it easier for small businesses to take advantage of the federal subsidy to keep workers on the payroll. Bloomberg's Irv Chapman reports from Washington.
Republican Steve Chabot endorsed the bill.
Back in March, the covered period was defined as 8 weeks. This bill extends the 8-week to 24 weeks.
Democratic sponsor Dean Phillips cited a plea from, among others, a restaurant owner in his district.
The problem is that because our business is a restaurant, we are not able to open it up fully, where we could hire our entire staff back under the conditions of the loan. The complexities of balancing staying open or closing will be determined by what the government is able to change via this bill.
Bipartisan co-sponsors have introduced a similar bill in the Senate. In Washington, Irv Chapman, Bloomberg Radio.
And recapping the story breaking this hour, the Boston Marathon has been canceled for the first time in its 124-year history. Organizers announced today they'll instead have a virtual event in which participants who verify they ran 26.2 miles on their own will receive their finisher's medal. Global News, 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. I'm Bob Moon.
When you follow the facts,
Bloomberg's been reporting on this intelligence community report.
When you seek out the experts,
the investment banks that Bloomberg speak to also want some relief.
No matter what else is happening,
it's been pretty hard to read the signals.
At least you know what's real.
The economic fallout from the virus risks becoming entrenched.
Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, weekdays at 1 a.m. Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
If you love them enough to listen to them practice the same song on tuba,
please be done.
Over and over and over and over and over, then surely you'll check nhtsa.gov/the right seat to make sure they're correctly buckled in the back seat.
Sounds good, honey.
Check today at nhtsa.gov/the right seat. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
If knowledge is power, the Bloomberg Terminal is your power up, connecting you to real-time financial data, market-moving news, powerful analytics, and an influential network of financial decision-makers around the world. Share ideas, negotiate trades, and gain the insight you need to make more informed decisions. See how the Terminal can take your workflow to the next level at Bloomberg.com/professional.
To protect her home and family in a disaster, Karen was willing to wade through water, mud, and insurance paperwork.
Yeah, I can do this.
You go, Karen! By simply understanding and updating what her insurance covers and doesn't cover now, she'll be better prepared no matter when disaster strikes. Learn other simple ways to protect your home and family before a natural disaster at ready.gov. That's ready.gov. A message from FEMA and the Ad Council.
How long? How much?
There's a reason flash storage is called flash storage and not electronic non-volatile computer memory storage. From quick and efficient data retrieval to instant scalability, everything about IBM flash storage is fast. It's also cloud-ready and surprisingly affordable, with a recommended monthly price of £310 for 24 terabytes of all flash. Order by the 30th of June and pay nothing for 90 days. Find out more at ibm.biz/flash offer.
This is a message from the government about the next stage of controlling coronavirus with NHS Test and Trace. To protect your friends and family, testing and tracing must become a new way of life. If you have symptoms, you need to get a test immediately. Don't leave home for any other reason. If you test positive, we will contact you to trace people who you might have infected. From now on, if you're told you've been exposed to an infected person, you must self-isolate for 14 days. Play your part and do the right thing so we can safely return to a more normal life. Go to nhs.uk or call 119. Stay alert, control the virus, save lives.
At Tesco, we've price-matched Aldi on hundreds of products like bananas, peppers, chicken breasts, mushrooms, Warburton's bread, strawberries, even avocados. That's Tesco products at Aldi prices. Because now more than ever, every little helps. Tesco. Prices checked on comparable products from GBLD stores and online twice weekly. Price most often found matched excluding promotions. Selected Tesco stores excluding Express and all Northern Ireland stores. Products and their availability vary weekly and by store. Details at tesco.com/Aldi price match.
Are you ready for the realist first-hand take of what's happening in the NBA? On their podcast, All the Smoke, former NBA players Matt Barnes and Steven Jackson bring their fiery intensity to the mic, dishing on the latest news and drama from on and off the court without boundaries.
Half man, half amazing. My friend, our brother, Vince Carter, man, welcome to the show.
Yo, what's up, man?
What's up, my brother?
Man, I'm good.
Search All the Smoke on TuneIn to listen. Let's be honest, we all spend too much of our day on social media. But at least you can spend your endless scroll time to discover new things on TuneIn. Follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to always be in the know about the best new stuff streaming in the app. From breaking news stories and live sporting events.
He does! Fabry wins it!
to standout stations and podcasts. Stay in touch with TuneIn.
With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games.
Bergeron, he scores!
With game replay on TuneIn, you can listen to every power play, slap shot, and goal of the 2019-2020 season so far.
Suter to Cunnin to Fiala, he scores!
And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search Classic Game Replays to start listening.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
News 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Stocks are advancing well off session highs, though. Let's head right over to the First Word breaking news desk for today's afternoon call. Here's Bill Maloney.
And good afternoon, Charlie. Main U.S. averages, like you said, in the green, off-session highs, and tech did overcome a negative start. Dow's currently up 93 points, S&P's gained 20, NASDAQ is higher by 58. The U.S. 10-year yield at 0.7%, WTI crude futures are up 3%, gold gains 8, and transports fall 40 points. Leaders to the upside in the Dow, Pfizer, Raytheon, and Procter & Gamble, while Disney and American Express led to the downside. In deal news, Cisco is said to near $1 billion takeover of software company Thousand Eyes. And in other news, Rolls-Royce was cut to junk by S&P. Home Depot hit a record intraday high, and Dollar Tree rose 11% after earnings. Wrapping things up, some of the names pointing after the bell tonight include Costco, Dell Technologies, and Salesforce. Live from the First Breaking News Desk, I'm Bill Maloney. Charlie?
Okay, thank you, Bill. And to hear live breaking news over your Bloomberg, type squawk, SQUAWK, on your terminal. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Well, Huawei continues to be in the news, and owing in part to our continued attention that we're paying to cybersecurity, and also some headlines yesterday coming out of Canada. Here to discuss all of that, Andy Purdy, Chief Security Officer for Huawei Technologies USA, joining us on the phone from Bethesda. Andy, really nice to have you back with us.
Thank you. Pleasure.
All right. So let's start in the news if we can. The CFO of Huawei, the parent company, continues to be part of a big legal fight in Canada. Help us understand what's going on, and candidly, beyond the legal issue here, sort of what it means for business, what it means for the brand at this point.
Well, the effort against Ms. Meng, our Chief Financial Officer, is part of the overall effort the last couple of years by the U.S. government to carpet bomb Huawei out of existence. And in terms of the impact on the company, the decision involving Ms. Meng and the process for extradition will take quite a number of months, if not years, before there might be an actual trial in the Eastern District of New York. And we have great confidence in the legal systems of Canada and the U.S., so we feel like she'll be vindicated in the end. But right now, this campaign against Huawei, the recent ramping up of pressure on American companies' ability to sell to Huawei, even through international companies, is going to have a tremendous negative impact on American jobs.
You know, it's interesting, that this is going on amid a week or two where we are seeing, once again, heightened tensions and back and forth between the head of the United States, President Trump, and, of course, Chinese President Xi Jinping. And how do you see this? You've got to run your business amid kind of all of this fury, and we're trying to figure out, is it rhetoric or is it going to turn into actions that ultimately impact both China and the United States?
Well, there's certainly been an impact on our company.
Right.
The impact was about $12 billion last year, and we haven't been able to estimate what the impact will be this year. Of course, it's complicated by the added factor of the pandemic. But you look at the overall situation, the geopolitical situation between China and the U.S. is what we're talking about, and that's exacerbated now by the U.S. presidential campaign. So the competition among President Trump and former Vice President Biden to out-maneuver the other in terms of anti-China rhetoric, kind of a new Red Scare kind of thing, indicates that this battle is going to go on at least through the election. And there doesn't seem to be rational discussion, and people don't seem to care about the fact that American jobs are going to be lost as a result.
And can you quantify, the jobs piece of this? I understand that obviously things are complicated, but in terms of the pandemic, and it remains to be seen what the total economic impact is. But help us understand, you guys have several offices around the country here. What has it meant? And maybe help us understand sort of the 1-2 punch, as it were, of this action and this confrontation between the United States and China, as well as the pandemic. Synthesize that for us, if you can, Andy.
Well, in terms of within the U.S., we have two issues. We have the issue of whether or not Huawei can sell to American companies, and right now we're serving parts of rural America. And the other issue is the ability of American companies, nearly 300, want to be able to sell to Huawei. So in terms of our global revenues, which last year, despite all this, were up about 19%, we were impacted about $12 billion.
Right.
But the annual amount that we procure from American companies is not just to serve our customers in America. It's our global market. At its height, we had about 30 or 32% of all Huawei global components came from American companies, and they're primarily in the semiconductor industry. And you can see in the last couple of months, and they can speak for it a lot better than I can, that American semiconductor companies and their associations, trade associations, have basically been saying, look, the limitations on the ability of American companies to sell to Huawei is averaging about $12 billion a year. That is estimated to be between 40 and 50,000 direct jobs, not to count the indirect jobs. And so the fact is, we're fighting for our survival. We're going to be okay, and we would like to continue to buy from American companies and buy as an American and want to be able to see those jobs continue. If we have to, we'll go elsewhere, and then we won't come back, and those American jobs will go away, and that's not going to help America, and in the long term, it's not going to hurt Huawei. And the strategy, you talk about the bigger picture, the strategy is that the U.S. wants to hurt Huawei to hurt China because they are afraid of the rise of China economically and militarily. So that's really at the heart of it. And so instead of promoting greater innovation of technology by America, they're trying to hurt Huawei. And that's not going to help America vis-a-vis China in terms of a long-term competition, which is very important.
Andy, to be fair, and unfortunately we've only got about 45 seconds here, but I mean, nothing ever happens in a vacuum, right? And I know as part of the latest, trade agreement, China was supposed to be buying a certain amount of energy products and so on and so forth, and that isn't necessarily happening. And you see China now, in terms of what it's doing in Hong Kong, there's a lot of uncertainty and moves on both sides. What's the responsibility of China in all of this? And unfortunately, just got about 30 seconds here.
Well, I mean, we're independent of the China government. We're an independent company, probably the largest privately owned company in China.
Right.
And so we can contribute to competition and job growth. So the conduct of the China government is different than us. And I may not like what they do, and I may not like what the U.S. government does, but that's separate from us.
Well, I wish we had more time. And Andy, you've been so gracious to, keep coming back so we can continue this conversation. So I look forward to engaging with you in the future. Andy Purdy at Huawei Technologies USA. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. It's a great time to buy a home or refinance yours. Mortgage rates are at a record low for the third time since the pandemic began. Freddie Mac's average for 30-year fixed-rate loans is at 3.15%. The previous low was 3.23. Few people were out and about in the home resale market last month. The National Association of Realtors says pending home sales fell nearly 22% to a record low. Pending sales measure signing of home purchase contracts. Stocks are modestly higher in the final hour. Data showing economic damage from the pandemic was not as bad as had been feared, or fueling the rally. The Dow was up 163, the S&P up 28, the Nasdaq up 86. Restaurant owners fear they could be wiped out if social distancing forces them to operate at a fraction of their capacity. The Wall Street Journal says added safety measures and increased cleaning will only add to the cost pressure. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Radio.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
With COVID-19, so much is unknown.
Is this the worst you've seen?
But we are committed to getting you every piece of information we can as soon as we can.
Tell us about this first big win you have. What is it, 24 million N95 masks?
Fewer unknowns.
Who's winning here? Where is the pressure right now?
That's our goal.
What worries you the most? The time it's going to take for a vaccine?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. Bloomberg and Eaton Vance are...
This is a message from the government about the next stage of controlling coronavirus with NHS Test and Trace. To protect your friends and family, testing and tracing must become a new way of life. If you have symptoms, you need to get a test immediately. Don't leave home for any other reason. If you test positive, we will contact you to trace people who you might have infected. From now on, if you're told you've been exposed to an infected person, you must self-isolate for 14 days. Play your part and do the right thing so we can safely return to a more normal life. Go to nhs.uk or call 119. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
At Tesco, we've price-matched Aldi on hundreds of products like bananas, peppers, chicken breasts, mushrooms, Warburton's bread, strawberries, even avocados. That's Tesco products at Aldi prices. Because now more than ever, every little helps. Tesco. Prices checked on comparable products from GBLD stores and online twice weekly. Price most often found matched excluding promotions. Selected Tesco stores excluding Express and all Northern Ireland stores. Products and their availability vary weekly and by store. Details at tesco.com/Aldi price match.
Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your seventh inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, oh, well, Jeter Downs. Didn't realize he was a top. Like, my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like, of course. Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting Nine podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for favorite baseball player. Active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of like active
round the bases with the Statcast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike. Just to go over the first couple of picks, Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one. Not only
catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn.
Okay, here we go.
With the NFL draft in the books and the schedule set, check out a TuneIn podcast for daily updates on the lead up to the 2020 season. Like the Ringer NFL Show, where a rotating cast of Ringer experts talk with players, coaches, and special guests about the NFL landscape.
A lot of the other teams that we consider...
Or ESPN's NFL Live.
If there are some delays because of the COVID-19...
Search sports on TuneIn to explore these pods and much more.
With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games. With Game Replay on TuneIn, you can hear every matchup of the 2019-2020 season so far. And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search classic Game Replays to start listening.
Want to relive the glory of college football?
Balls over a man, into the end zone,
Come explore TuneIn's classic Game Replay collection to hear ESPN's complete coverage of the 2019 New Year's 6 bowl games. Don't miss your chance to experience the Rose Bowl, the 2020 National Championship, featuring Clemson and LSU.
There are going to be 2 champions on the field tomorrow night. There's going to be 1 team hold up the trophy.
Pass to the 5, touchdown!
Search classic Game Replays to listen for free.
New York, Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston, Bloomberg 1061. To San Francisco, Bloomberg 960. To the country, Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
Well, coming up, we're going to hear from Dave Wilson. He's going to talk about trucking. You're so excited.
I am excited because it tells you a lot about the economy, or potentially can. And this is happening as we're seeing stocks take a little bit of a leg down. We've got a bit of a mixed trade right now. Little changes overall. So let's actually bring back Charlie Pellet. Let's talk about those numbers,
Well,
Charlie.
let's talk about those numbers indeed. Last update told you we were higher with the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all in the green. Not the case right now. 22-point drop in the Dow, just turning negative, down now by 0.1%. 28 minutes to go ahead of the closing bell. We've got the S&P up 7, up 0.2%. NASDAQ up 8, up by 0.1%. Stocks paired gains after President Trump said he would be holding a press conference tomorrow to discuss China potentially stoking tensions between the world's two largest economies. The 10-year down 5/30 seconds with a yield of 0.69%. We've got gold up 0.5%, $17.17 the ounce. Crude oil up 1.9%. West Texas Intermediate crude now at $33.41 a barrel. American Express says it's shifting hundreds and hundreds of its employees and its sales units to handle collections and other credit work, and plans to set aside more for loan losses this quarter. Shares of American Express down now by 2.8%. Also, some of the other stories we're following. Credit Suisse Group is preparing a review of one of its most profitable business areas under new CEO Thomas Gottstein after taking a hit on loans to its richest clients. UBS shares down now by 0.6%. Toll Brothers surging after the company posted profit that beat estimates. Toll shares right now, they have just turned lower. As a matter of fact, we've got Toll down 52 cents, $32.50 right now on shares of Toll. 3:33 on Wall Street. Time now for the Small Business Report, and here's John Tucker.
The American Camp Association estimates there are 14,000 camps in the U.S. Most of them are small businesses like Apple Farm Arts and Music Center in Elmer, New Jersey. For this nonprofit, the pandemic means no summer camp for kids. Executive Director Corey Solomon is with us now. Corey, this is heartbreaking.
It sadly doesn't seem like a reality that is safe. And ultimately, as a summer camp director, we always start with trying to make sure our kids and the families, that they're safe. And we don't have enough information. Even with the guidelines that have been rolled out, the CDC and the American Camping Association has put out a lot of information. But with so many unknowns about this virus still and how it affects children and what's going to happen with this a second wave and, living in an intimate environment like a residential camp where we have 350 people sleeping and eating and, playing together, it's not a reality that I think will happen. So sadly, we are planning to cancel the summer, which would be the first summer we don't have camp in 60 years.
In terms of the money that you got, the reservations, how does that work?
That's the part of this that makes it financially so difficult because most of our families register for camp at the end of the summer for the following summer, and then they pay quarterly payments leading up to that. So we've already collected, several hundreds of thousands of dollars in tuition. What we're trying to do now is figure out the best options to make sure that we do right by our families because those relationships ultimately are the most important, but also make sure that we can make it through to next summer still. So we're providing families with the option to roll over their camp tuition to next summer, which would be the most helpful financially for us outside of donating the money, which is, of course, ultimately the best choice for the organization. But, of course, not all families are in a position to be able to do that. And then the third option would be that they do get a refund.
Corey Solomon, Executive Director of Apple Farm Arts and Music Center in Elmer, New Jersey. Best of luck. Thanks for being with us. I'm John Tucker. That's your Bloomberg Small Business Report.
And we thank you very much, John Tucker. NASDAQ down by a point right now. S&P holding on to a 3-point gain, barely. The Dow down 56. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thanks so much. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week right here on Bloomberg Radio. Called this at the top of the show.
Totally.
I said Grateful Dead.
I love it.
I knew it was coming.
Yeah.
Let's cruise into a little Thursday afternoon here with Dave Wilson. Trucking, it is one of Carol's favorite things.
It was my first concert.
Oh, the Grateful Dead?
Mm-hmm. My brother, who was a total deadhead, would travel all over the place.
Yeah.
With Jerry Garcia doll hanging in his car.
Wow.
Yeah. He was kind of all in on it. Anyway, he took me and my best friend to a Dead concert. It was great. It was quite an experience.
I bet it was quite an experience. All right, Dave Wilson, before we lose Carol Massar completely, yesterday we lost her to ice cream, today we lose her to Grateful Dead reminiscing. Talk to us about the trucking industry in your chart.
Well, Jason, in fairness, and we kind of lost you yesterday to Tom Petty. I figured it was Carol's turn.
Dave Wilson, I adore you. I really do. You're just such a good guy.
You keep it fair, Dave.
I know.
You do.
I know you do. All right. So let's talk trucks.
Well, the trucking was sort of an obvious choice because of the nature of the chart. And it's something that came to my attention because Matt Maley, who's the chief market strategist at Miller Tabak, referred to trucking stocks in a note he had out yesterday as being an area of strength to the point where perhaps it's an economic indicator that, things may come around sooner and much more strongly than many people anticipate after, the recession that we've basically fallen into at this point. And to kind of show what's going on there, because, there's been so much focus when you look at transportation on the airlines and the way that they've been hurt. And it kind of obscures what's happening elsewhere within the transportation industry. So what I did was take the S&P Composite 1500 index, pretty broad-based. I mean, there are only 2 truckers in the S&P 500, so, I figured might as well get a broader group. And then compare that with other elements within the S&P transportation categories, specifically looking at railroads, air freight and logistics companies, and airlines. And when you run the numbers, you find out that over the past 12 months, at least the 12 months ended yesterday, the S&P Composite Trucking Index was up 39%. And in fact, had made back its losses in February and March as stocks were falling, and set records the last 2 days. So if it's up today, you're talking 3 in a row. Now, you compare that with the railroads and the air freight companies, they're both up about 1% in the last 12 months. And the railroads, were holding their own. The air freight was holding its own. Airlines, down 47%. So the transportation index was actually lower because of the weakness in the airlines. And so, trucking companies, you're talking about shipping goods here, there, and everywhere. And the idea that this group would not only hold up over the last 12 months, but basically bounce back from, the bear market we saw in February and March. Well, it is telling. And we'll see how much economic significance it has, but it's certainly something that caught Maley's attention. If you want to know more, folks, send me an email. I'll get you the chart, the explanation that goes with it, and everything I do going forward. The email address is dwilson@bloomberg.net. That's dwilson@bloomberg.net.
All right, Dave Wilson, thank you so much. World and At. Now let's go to Bob Moon.
Very much. They are trying to get a handle on the violence in Minneapolis. Mayor Jacob Fry responding to violent protests that have brought death and destruction to the streets of Minneapolis after an out-of-work security guard was killed by police officers on Monday. On the activities seen over the past few nights, the mayor says he believes in Minneapolis. At a press conference today, he said over the next few days there will be an all-out effort to restore peace in Minneapolis.
I've authorized a unified command structure that allows our Chief Arredondo to utilize resources, personnel from other jurisdictions. We've requested assistance from the state, and we are thankful to the governor for the support.
There have been 2 straight nights of violence in Minneapolis. A statement of compassion from the president today, which led reporters to ask White House Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany why it took the president until this morning to acknowledge the U.S. COVID-19 death toll reaching 100,000.
The president recognized that landmark before we even hit it. The president, that was, after all, it was the impetus behind him lowering the flag to half staff. He did that for several days. And that was an acknowledgement of that number approaching, and he acknowledged it in a tweet this morning.
Global news, 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Bob Moon.
President of the Jewish Communal Fund, Zoya Raines, and her husband Robert Friedman, Jewish activists and philanthropists, talk about why they chose the Jewish Communal Fund for their charitable giving.
As very busy working parents, we wanted to focus more on the charity part of it and wanted to focus more on our children and less on the administration.
The Jewish Communal Fund is one of the oldest and largest donor-advised funds, but at the same time, they're totally up to date and have state-of-the-art systems for us to access and manage our contributions online. The assets in our fund at the JCF grow tax-free, so we can generate more charitable dollars to support the charities that we care about most.
Let JCF minimize your taxes and maximize your charitable giving.
We're incredibly passionate about our charity, and the JCF allows us to focus more on the charity and less on the administration and the headaches.
For more information about Jewish Communal Fund, visit our website at jcfny.org and request a new fund kit.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. I came out in the 11th grade. Nobody was embracing you. The kids were cruel. It was very difficult to be gay. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma. The hard part was determining that I was going to do it, but I definitely didn't do it alone.
At age 30, with the help of her mentor, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
I have a mentor, Maria. She convinced me to continue my education and to finish what I started to get my diploma. Just never judges. She's a true role model. If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
You're living in a world built on science, politics.
This is a message from the government about the next stage of controlling coronavirus with NHS Test and Trace. To protect your friends and family, testing and tracing must become a new way of life. If you have symptoms, you need to get a test immediately. Don't leave home for any other reason. If you test positive, we will contact you to trace people who you might have infected. From now on, if you're told you've been exposed to an infected person, you must self-isolate for 14 days. Play your part and do the right thing so we can safely return to a more normal life. Go to nhs.uk or call 119. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Behind the highlight reels, championship rings, and colossal paychecks, there are sports stories that fuel, deepen, and even challenge our love for the game. For true tales of underdogs, anti-heroes, and game-changing innovators, explore a sports documentary on TuneIn, like Sports Wars, telling the origin stories of classic rivalries, Raise Sports, about the concussion crisis that threatens football's future, and Dunkumentaries, a podcast devoted to the beauty and power of the slam dunk. For these and more, search sports documentaries on TuneIn. Ready for a one-of-a-kind look at the NFL? On the PFF NFL podcast, Steve Palazzolo and Sam Munson interpret the unique stats of Pro Football Focus to analyze the league, uncover secret superstars, and discuss which teams to watch out for in the next Super Bowl.
Let's talk some football. Let's do it, Steve. All sorts of stuff. We're going to do most improved defenses around the NFL. Solomon Wilcots, our very own. He went into some detail over at PFF.com. Most improved defenses around the
Search PFF NFL on TuneIn to listen. With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games.
Bergeron, he scores!
With game replay on TuneIn, you can listen to every power play, slap shot, and goal of the 2019-2020 season so far.
Suter to Cunnin to Fiala, he scores!
And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search classic game replays to start listening. Be part of the sports conversation with Sports Talk Radio on TuneIn. Join the discussion around your favorite local teams with sports stations broadcasting in your area.
The game will be 185 to 183 and somebody wins, whatever. Football, it's either full go or it's not. You got like, oh, it's thud. I can practice what they call
Follow national storylines and debates with ESPN Radio.
Does the NBA have a hiring problem when it comes to front office jobs in the leagues and a minority hiring issue? Stephen A. chimed in on that today on First Take.
It also resonates with me, Max. You can
and appreciate this position. One of the candidates was Brian Colangelo. We know what happened. I like Brian, but we know.
And hear what's happening worldwide with international channels like Talk Sport.
Seems as I'm sort of doing my life in reverse at the moment. I was on cricket tours when I was 20 years old, and now I'm 31. I'm sat at home injured playing PlayStation. So it's a tournament basically where you create your own character.
In your backyard and around the globe, keep your finger on the pulse of the sports world with TuneIn. Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your seventh inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, Jeter Downs. Didn't realize he was a top. Like, my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like, of course. Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting Nine podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for favorite baseball player. Active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of like active
round the bases with the Statcast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike, just to go over the first couple of picks. Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one. Not only
catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn.
News 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Worst level of the day, 13 minutes to go ahead of the closing bell. Stocks paired gains after President Trump said he will be holding a press conference tomorrow to discuss China, potentially stoking tensions between the world's two largest economies. The Dow now down by 93 points, a drop of 0.4%. S&P down by a point at 3,034, giving up earlier gains. NASDAQ also lower, down now by 24 points, lower by 0.3%. 10-year down 430 seconds, looking at a yield of 0.69%. Gold is up 0.5%, 17.18 the ounce, and crude oil, West Texas Intermediate crude, up 1.8%, 33.39 a barrel. So again, recapping, equities lower across the board. Let's recap the Dow, dropping now to 104 points lower, down 0.4%. S&P down by 0.1. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
I'm driving in my car. I turn on the radio.
How about you let me drive?
Oh, no. Who's gonna drive you home?
Honey, please, I'll do the driving.
Drive on.
Excuse me, I want to drive.
Just drive, baby.
It's the question that drives us.
This is the Drive to the Close.
That funky music will drive us till the dawn.
On Bloomberg Radio.
It is time for the Drive to the Close. Back with us. I'm excited to have back with us Doug Sioka, CEO and partner at Kavar Capital Partners, roughly $775 million in assets under management, based in Leawood, Kansas, and that's where we find him on the phone on this Thursday. So, Doug, how are you? How's it going?
I'm well. How are you and Jason?
We're doing okay. Week 11. All right. Here we are.
Yeah, week 11. We're making our way through it. What's the ground in Kansas?
The sea of the ground is good. I mean, it's wet today, but that's pretty par for the course this time of year. But things are good. I think in general, broadly speaking, clients are well. They're optimistic, and I think. They deserve it. So there's a lot of things that have developed. I think I was on with you guys in the first week of April, and so much has happened since then. And I think by and large, very positively predisposed.
Well, okay, until President Trump and President Xi started going at it again when it comes to U.S.-China. A headline crossed the Bloomberg at 3:17 p.m. Eastern. Trump says he's going to hold a news conference on China Friday, and the rally that we saw, stocks went from their highs and took a leg down. We're just a little bit lower, but nonetheless, investors are nervous about this. Here's another big macro story that we've had to deal with a lot, I feel like, Doug, over the last couple of years. Big deal in your world, or how do you see it?
Well, I think incrementally, sure. I mean, you have to figure that last year we did see some thaw of the China-U.S. tensions in coordination with a Fed that had reversed course from its more hawkish posture at the end of 2018. And that combination really lit an explosive broad-based rally. So now geopolitical tensions are escalating. I mean, literally as of the last few weeks, maybe a couple months, and certainly the blame game at the start of the pandemic. But if the geopolitical tensions are escalating, but we still have a Fed that's firmly committed to loose monetary policy, then I think the outcome of that tension point is more than equal and opposite and favors the Fed. But keep in mind, I mean, this is a budding impediment that is likely to be more of a conflagration. At least is partially politically motivated, right? Because it seems like the one thing that both sides of the aisle can agree on is China is now public enemy number one of the United States, so who can be more hawkish? While Trump's in office, he's not going to miss an opportunity to be coronated that title.
And so do you just sort of stay put and ride this out here, Doug? Or what do you do as you're looking toward, I mean, we're almost to the point where we really are talking about the back half of the year. How do you synthesize this and feather it in with, you know, what we have still, which is a pandemic and a crisis and a health crisis and economy that has largely ground to a halt?
Yeah, the economy has ground to a halt. Obviously, the market has done just the opposite, right, Jason? I think, and the recovery is taken on almost warp speed proportions. And it's really the speed, but not the magnitude, that's surprising, just given the historical context of the market being a leading indicator of the economy. So you get to the point now when you say we've had fantastic monetary policy intervention. We've had fantastic fiscal policy intervention. We're kind of in a middling range, right? A lot of the early gains have clearly been made. Now we're at a point of inflection of where does the economy go from here to corroborate the market's move? So are there sectors of the market that still offer opportunity in strong consideration of what's taking place still on the geopolitical side? So it's just another element that has to go into the calculus of identifying strong expected return sectors within the stock and bond markets.
I feel like
by no means do we think it's time to reverse course and raise cash.
I was going to say, I feel like there's a lot, though, Doug, in that calculus right now.
Oh, there's no question. There's no question. I mean, I think, right, there's not only the economic but the emotional, and I think when you go through in that the type of pandemic and the sort of that combination or coordination of fear that we experienced, it made it difficult to compartmentalize and sort of see through opportunity from the headlines, which were undoubtedly and deservedly very negative. So I think that's the thing that people are still struggling with as they look to commit new capital.
And so what worries you the most here?
You know, I don't know that I'd prioritize any of the set of worries. I think more than anything, complacency. You know, complacency is a problem from the standpoint of false confidence in the curve flattening that's taken place, too quick as it relates to reopening economies, being negligent or ignoring data points that would obviously be in the broad-based best interest of the collective American populace to go very slow. And I think what happens, right, is we all have this pent-up energy and optimism, and for, again, as I said earlier, with good reason.
Yeah.
But, like, being very measured in sort of the allocation of our energy and our efforts as well as the allocation of our capital.
So I'm curious, were you putting a lot of money to get, to work, or new money put to work, Doug, when we saw the sell-off? And are you just kind of marking time right now?
No, a little bit of both. So, like, we put money to work, but never with any, probably in hindsight, Carol, not enough speed, right? I mean, certainly the March 23rd bottom, which is held, we think it's going to hold. It's very obvious in hindsight where it was. You know, did we back up the truck to equities on the March 24th? We didn't, but in a very measured fashion, as it was appropriate for clients and sort of their risk profile and their ultimate long-term objectives. But we're by no means pulling off the throttle, because if you think about what's happened, and certainly when you look at the attribution of the index, well, the S&P is down 6 or 7% for the year, but the average stock of the S&P is still down 12 or 14%. And those are still the biggest 500 companies in the world. Yeah. So there's a whole subset of companies, particularly small cap, international, where they've seen considerably larger drawdowns, which we think make for even more attractive entry point.
Yeah, especially if once we get on the other side of this, if consumers do come back, if the economy starts to reopen, with some kind of momentum, we certainly could see something more play out when it comes to the equity markets.
It will, right? I mean, and you think about, we mentioned being optimistic. Like, we're so optimistic on the science. We're so optimistic on the American spirit. We're so optimistic on U.S. economy 2.0 or 3.0, whatever we're going to call this post-COVID construct. But there are going to be lots of changes in business and therefore changes in investment opportunities. But we always want to think in terms of marginality, right? How many people have gone to your program and said, we're never going to need commercial office space again, or we're never going to have an attraction of living in or commuting to a big city? I don't agree with any of those statements in totality, but there are going to be subtle changes to that effect, and those should end up being very, very positive.
Yeah, no, it's a really interesting point, and we always love your optimism, Doug. It's really good. It's really good to hear. Doug Sioka, Chief Executive Officer and Partner for Kavar Capital Partners, joining us on the phone from Leawood, Kansas. Carol.
Well, a little realism, right? Like, you do. Like, I kind of got up this morning. I'm like, God, I miss taking trips. Like, I was really thinking about it and thought, as soon as we can figure this out, I kind of want to resume that part of our world. So it's just a case of figuring it out, making it safe. And I do think it'll be smarter and more constructive. I don't think people will necessarily, at least initially, jump on planes as quickly as they used to. All right, stick around, everybody. We've got the closing bell coming your way in just a few minutes right here on Bloomberg Radio.
When you leave out the rumors,
the illness does not come.
You know that feeling when you get more than you expected? Like discovering that the box of chocolates has a whole other layer underneath, or scoring extra poppadoms with your takeaway, or joining Tesco Mobile and finding out you get the latest phones and 99% UK network coverage. Yeah, that moment feels good, right? Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
99% 4G population coverage indoors and outdoors across UK.
This is an important update from the government about coronavirus symptoms and testing. If you have any one of the following symptoms, a high temperature, a new continuous cough, loss of taste or smell, you can now get tested. Do not leave home for any reason other than to get tested. Find out how to get a test and how long to isolate at nhs.uk/coronavirus. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
At Tesco, we've price matched Aldi on hundreds of products, like Bash Aldi Price Match.
The NHL is always on the ice with these awesome hockey podcasts on TuneIn. Get your goal with the Spittin' Chicklets podcast.
Brian Yandel, Keith Yandel, thanks for coming on. What's going on?
Nothing much. Glad to be here. You guys got some nice digs here.
We heard you took Southwest 2-stop flight to get out here.
Yeah, well, just
carve up the ice with NHL at the rink.
The other day, I wrote a story. Artemi Panarin, Semyon Varlamov, Sergei Bobrovsky, they all helped arrange for the purchase of N95 masks to benefit hospitals in their respective markets. This is another one of those positive stories you're seeing.
Or create your own power play with Locked On NHL.
All these teams invested future assets to take a run at the Stanley Cup right now. Like, all of those teams would have a real serious gripe, like trading these multiple first-round picks to make a run at a cup. You're right.
Discover these and more NHL podcasts right here on TuneIn.
Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. There you have it. Sound of the closing bell at the New York Stock Exchange as we wrap up trading on this Thursday, May 28th. Folks from Verizon virtually ringing that closing bell. We begin with a headline from the Bloomberg Professional Service. The number of U.S. virus cases up 1.2%. That number in line with the past week's average. It was a down Thursday with the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all retreating. Stocks closing at or near the worst level of the day. S&P down 6 at 3,029, a drop of 0.2%. The Dow down 147 points, down 0.6%. NASDAQ was down 43, a drop of 0.5%. Stocks erase gains after President Trump said he'll be holding a press conference tomorrow to discuss China, potentially stoking tensions between the world's two largest economies. Now, as for the overall market backdrop, Doug Sioka is CEO at Kavar Capital. He was our guest moments ago right here on Bloomberg Business Week.
Now we're at a point of inflection of where does the economy go from here to corroborate the market's move? So are there sectors of the market that still offer opportunity in strong consideration of what's taking place still on the geopolitical side? So it's just another element that has to go into the calculus of identifying strong expected return sectors within the stock and bond markets.
The 10-year down 3/32 with a yield of 0.69%. Gold up 0.6%, 17.19 the ounce, and West Texas Intermediate crude up 2.3%, 33.59 a barrel. American Airlines Group cutting 30% of its management and support staff, or about 5,100 jobs. Airlines as a group move lower today. American Airlines Group down 8.4%. UAL was lower by 5.9%. Delta down 2.5%. Southwest lower by 3.3%. Also, Boeing did advance today after the plane maker resumed production of the 737 MAX. Boeing shares up today by 0.2%. Recapping, S&P down 0.2%. I'm Charlie Pellett. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Move around. Motion creates emotion.
I feel the earth move under my feet.
You move like they do. I've never seen anyone move that fast.
All right, people, let's move like we've got a purpose.
Company's called Movers and Shakers. They cost a little more, but that name cracked me up.
Bloomberg Business Week, Movers and Shakers, with Carol Masser and Jason Kelly on Bloomberg Radio.
It is time to take a look at some of the winners and losers, movers and shakers, on this Thursday afternoon. Of course, Charlie, breaking down those closing numbers, we really ran out of steam after that headline that the White House, the president, expecting and planning to hold a press conference tomorrow on China. And so that really took some of the wind out of the sails when it came to the equity trade. So what did it mean for the S&P 500? Kind of an even split. 209 names in the index, Jason. Higher today, 295 lower. One unchanged.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, we're getting a few earnings. Those have been driving things one way or the other. One of your worst performers today, I believe it was still your worst performer, was HPQ. We talked about that yesterday after the close of trading. HP, of course, that's the printer side of the business, the printer copier side of the business, not to be confused with HPE, which is the enterprise side of that.
It's supposed to be the boring side of the business.
Yeah, it is.
Right, the old economy?
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of boring. Can I say that? I just did.
You did. Done.
I did. But that was disappointing. It was interesting to get Anand Srinivasan's perspective on that yesterday after those numbers came out. And, you know, part of it is just a little sluggishness, but it does seem to be more name-specific maybe than economy-specific at this point, demand-specific.
Well, and especially this is kind of the, we're really through earnings season, right? And so it's trickling out. Although we have been hearing from a lot of the retailers. In fact, some of them are crossing the Bloomberg as we speak. We are waiting for Costco and Nordstrom, but Ulta Beauty looks like they are coming out. And this is a name that we often see come up among the biggest gainers or losers.
Swings so wildly.
It really does, right? So let's see. Ulta Beauty, first quarter comp sales, this is key. It's down 35.3%. The estimate was for a decline of 34.8%. It's stores, right? Nobody's there. They're shut down. First quarter loss per share of $1.39. The estimate was for earnings of $3.26 a share. And the stock in the after hours, let's get a quick check here. It's down about 2% here. But, everybody expects these kinds of names to have, this is one of those quarters we know it's not going to be great. Stock's down about 4% this year.
One quick thing, sorry, to correct you. I believe it was first quarter loss per share of $1.39 versus a gain last year. So that wasn't the estimate.
Oh, forgive me. You're right. It was versus forgive me. Thank you for that correction.
Consensus, it looks like, was 68 cent profit is what the street was looking for. So swinging to a loss almost going all the way the other way, double. So not good.
Yeah, no, not good.
It's not a good report by
and they're drawing down an $800 million under revolving credit line, and they're suspending their stock buyback program. That's no surprise, right? This is a time where companies are retrenching. They're trying to amass and conserve all the cash that they have, and so that's ultimately what they are doing. First quarter net sales, by the way, $1.17 billion, down 33% year over year.
Yeah, I believe we're getting numbers from Salesforce. Just want to bring those to you real quickly. We are. Let's see what second quarter revenue, $4.89 billion. This is the forecast of $4.9 billion. The estimate there is for $5.03 billion. So that's light. Salesforce seeing fiscal year revenue at $20 billion, had seen 21 to 21.1, and the estimate for 20.67. So that is light as well. Let's just get it.
But not terrible if you think about in terms of reining in. They're still going to make a lot of money. Stock's just a little bit lower in the after hours, down about 0.6% here, Jason, and the stock is up 11% so far here in 2020. Let's talk about the VIX.
Let's talk about it. Volatility up a touch here as folks got worried toward the end of the day about China. The VIX up about 3.7%, closing at 28.65. This is Bloomberg.
All right, Dave, you're up.
Hi, my name is Dave.
Wilson, where are you? Wilson!
Just what do you think you're doing, Dave?
We're going for a price on Wilson.
Open up the door, it's Dave! Who? Dave!
Hey, Mr. Wilson. Dave Wilson back with us with your stock of the day. What's you got?
I got Simulations Plus, Jason. It's a provider of software that drug makers and other companies use to discover and develop new products. The programs run simulations of lab experiments and model data, among other features. Simulations Plus was founded in 1996 and went public in 1997. The ticker is SLP. Now, the shares rose in 10 of the last 11 years, with 2016 as the one exception. And during that time, they soared more than 31-fold. While Simulations Plus stumbled this year between mid-February and mid-March, along with a whole lot of other stocks, it's surged since then. The rally gained momentum today after the company was picked for the S&P Small Cap 600 Index. It will be added before Monday's open to replace the digital video recording company TiVo, which is being required. Now, once that change is made, funds tracking the Small Cap Index will have to own Simulations Plus. That prospect helped lift the shares to a record, and they also recorded the biggest gain since November 2007. They rose more than 22.5%.
Big move up. That is certainly notable. All right, Dave Wilson, thank you so much. Dave Wilson with his stock of the day. Nordstrom also crossing.
Yeah, first quarter loss per share coming in at $3.33. The estimate had been for a loss of $1.34. So safe to say that's a miss. First quarter net sales down 40%, and that is just a tough beat there for Nordstrom.
So you're going to love this. Stock's up 1.1% in the after hours.
Wait, what?
Just telling you, 1.5% now. So climbing.
Wow. Interesting.
What's it doing? Let me just take a quick look at what it's doing for the year. It's down 56% for the year.
Yeah, so a lot of room to move. I mean, we have seen these retailers swing back and forth. A couple of your biggest gainers yesterday, Kohl's and Gap, were among your worst performers today. So we'll continue to keep an eye on those retailers.
Up 2.8% now.
We're going to talk retail with Margaret Keane in just a minute. First up, though, let's get to Ed Baxter. He's got world national headlines.
Hi, Jason. Hi, Carol. New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio says it is time to talk about gradual reopening.
Because you have done it so well, we're now actually in a position to start talking about opening things up, step by step, phase by phase.
Yeah, he says doesn't mean rushing back, but by the second week of June, the possibility of
restricted to curbside pickup or in-store pickup. That means not wandering the aisles, shopping or lingering or comparing things, but, placing an order and coming and getting it. So it's a quick transaction with limited contact between people.
And he says he'd like to see schools open September 10th. Now, the dangers of removing social distancing barriers too quickly, the mayor of Montgomery, Alabama, Stephen Reed.
We're seeing the spikes not only in Montgomery, but also throughout Alabama. And that is problematic for our business owners, it's problematic for our schools, it's problematic for our hospitals, our first responders, and our entire community.
China, Hong Kong. China going ahead with a motion toward passing new security measures for the region. Former Governor Chris Patton says Xi Jinping and China have become an enemy.
He's been throwing China's weight around in a way which is a danger to all democracies around the world. and I think he needs to be called out.
And he says he hopes business can find a way to continue keep Hong Kong a financial hub. And support is bipartisan in the U.S. Nancy Pelosi.
And so we want everyone to oppose this law that the Chinese are putting forth to take away that autonomy from Hong Kong.
And she wants to go ahead with financial pressures. The president announcing he'll hold a news briefing tomorrow regarding China. In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter. This is Bloomberg.
The markets. No, you can't just run screaming from the room.
A lot of economists are just throwing up their hands and saying, we don't know.
But you don't have to manage this alone.
What are you looking at to give you some sort of compass through this period?
Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney.
What is your early read as to the scope and scale of this plan?
Bloomberg Markets. Weekday mornings at 10 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Melissa from Michigan. I work an extra part-time job serving lunch at my child's school, but I still can't afford to put food on our table.
Daniel from California. Choosing whether to pay the rent or pay to fix the car to get to work doesn't leave us with much at all. Now we can't even pay for meals.
Hunger is a story we can end. End it at feedingamerica.org. Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
Market upheavals.
This is a message from the government about the next stage of controlling coronavirus with NHS Test and Trace. To protect your friends and family, testing and tracing must become a new way of life. If you have symptoms, you need to get a test immediately. Don't leave home for any other reason. If you test positive, we will contact you to trace people who you might have infected. From now on, if you're told you've been exposed to an infected person, you must self-isolate for 14 days. Play your part and do the right thing so we can safely return to a more normal life. Go to nhs.uk or call 119. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
At Tesco, we've price-matched Aldi on hundreds of products like bananas, peppers, chicken breasts, mushrooms, Warburton's bread, strawberries, even avocados. That's Tesco products at Aldi prices. Because now more than ever, every little helps. Tesco. Prices checked on comparable products from GBLD stores and online twice weekly. Price most often found matched excluding promotions. Selected Tesco stores excluding Express and all Northern Ireland stores. Products and their availability vary weekly and by store. Details at tesco.com/Aldi price match.
Want to relive the glory of college football?
Balls over a man, into the end zone.
Come explore TuneIn's classic game replay collection to hear ESPN's complete coverage of the 2019 New Year's 6 bowl games. Don't miss your chance to re-experience the Rose Bowl, the 2020 National Championship featuring Clemson and LSU.
There are going to be 2 champions on the field tomorrow night. There's going to be 1 team hold up the trophy.
10, to the 5, touchdown! Search Classic Game Replays to listen for free.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Wondering what to play next? Want to know what other TuneIn listeners are listening to right now? Head to the trending section under Browse to explore the most popular stations and podcasts on TuneIn today. Millions of listeners like you can't be wrong.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Let's
Let's be honest, we all spend too much of our day on social media. But at least you can spend your endless scroll time to discover new things on TuneIn. Follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to always be in the know about the best new stuff streaming in the app. From breaking news stories and live sporting events.
Yeah, but it's unique times. I think there's unique circumstances, and we're trying
to stand out stations and podcasts. Stay in touch with TuneIn.
The NHL is always on the ice with these awesome hockey podcasts on TuneIn. Get your goal with the Spittin' Chicklets podcast.
Brian Yandel, Keith Yandel, thanks for coming on. What's going on?
Nothing much. Glad to be here. You guys got some nice digs here.
We heard you took Southwest 2-stop flight to get out here.
Yeah, well, just...
Carve up the ice with NHL at the rink.
The other day I wrote a story. Artemi Panarin, Semyon Varlamov, Sergei Bobrovsky, they all helped arrange for the purchase of N95 masks to benefit hospitals in their respective markets. This is another one of those positive stories you're seeing.
Or create your own power play with Locked On NHL.
All these teams invested future assets to take a run at the Stanley Cup right now. Like, all of those teams would have a real serious gripe, like trading these multiple first-round picks to make a run at a cup. You're right.
Discover these and more NHL podcasts right here on TuneIn.
Based on the theory that they're a neutral platform, which they are not an editor with a viewpoint. My executive order calls for platform, which they are not an editor with a viewpoint. My executive order calls for new regulations under Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act to make it that social media companies that engage in censoring or any political conduct will not be able to keep their liability shield. That's a big deal. They have a shield. They can do what they want. They have a shield. They're not going to have that shield. My executive order further instructs the Federal Trade Commission, FTC, to prohibit social media companies from engaging in any deceptive acts or practices affecting commerce. This authority resides in Section 5 of the Federal Trade Commission Act. I think you know it pretty well. Most of you know it very well. I would think you know it quite well, right? Additionally, I'm directing the Attorney General to work cooperatively with the states. He's going to be working very much and very closely in cooperation with the states to enforce their own laws against such deceptive business practices. The states have broad and powerful authority to regulate in this arena, and they'll be doing it also, and we encourage them to do it if they see exactly as we've been seeing. It's what they're doing is tantamount to monopoly, you can say. It's tantamount to taking over the airwaves. Can't let it happen. Otherwise, we're not going to have a democracy. We're not going to have anything to do with a republic. Finally, I'm directing my administration to develop policies and procedures to ensure taxpayer dollars are not going in any social media company that repress free speech. The government spends billions of dollars on giving them money. They're rich enough, so we're going to be doing none of it or very little of it. As president, I'll not allow the American people to be bullied by these giant corporations. Many people have wanted this to be done by presidents for a long time. And now we're doing it, and I'm sure they'll be doing a lawsuit, and I'm also sure that we're going to be going for legislation in addition to this, and the legislation will start immediately. And I tell you, I've been called by Democrats that want to do this, and so I think you could possibly have a bipartisan situation. But we're fed up with it, and it's unfair, and it's been very unfair, and we'll see what happens. Any questions?
Mr. President, given your concern with Twitter, have you given any consideration to deleting your account, to just walking away from this platform you've been so critical of?
Well, if you weren't fake, I would not even think about it. I would do that in a heartbeat. But the news is fake. If you look at what gets printed in newspapers, if only the public could understand where, they're reading a story and they think it's real, and it's not real in so many cases. And I'm not saying in every case. You have some great journalists. You have some journalists that I have great respect for. But largely, I find, at least in a political sense, there's so much fake news, it's disgraceful. I would do that in a heartbeat if we had a fair press in this country, I would do that in a heartbeat. There's nothing I'd rather do than get rid of my whole Twitter account, but I'm able to get to
So you've been listening to President Trump. It's a playback from the White House signing that social media executive order. This is something we've been talking about all day today, Jason, expected. What's interesting is we'll have to see what the next leg is, right? And whether or not that liability clause, whether or not regulators start to weigh in on this and change the dynamics, if you will, specifically for social media companies. They've been protected against really third parties' posts and lawsuits as long as they act in good faith in either taking down or limiting the visibility of inappropriate tweets. So we do wonder how that might change going forward. So stay tuned, everybody, but this is certainly maybe the new media fight, if you will, of the day.
Absolutely could be. All right, let's move to a conversation. I have been so looking forward to catching up with our next guest. She's a widely admired CEO in a business that is at the crux of so many things we care deeply about. I'm talking about Margaret Keane, Chief Executive Officer of Synchrony Financial, joining us on the phone from Connecticut. Margaret, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. You and I spent some time together a few years ago now at the Economic Club of New York. It seems like 100 years ago. The world was a very different place. And I do wonder, because you have such keen insights into what's going on with the American consumer, how is the consumer doing right now?
Well, I think going into this is kind of a pre-pandemic, then I guess pandemic, and kind of now we're opening up, so we're kind of seeing different trends. I would say going into the pandemic, the consumer was very strong. We were doing really well. Sales were strong. Payments were coming in. The consumer was really acting very responsibly, and we felt like we were going to have, a great year. Then the pandemic came along, and obviously, the initial onset of that really shut down most of the retail landscape, and we saw sales, and we said this in our earnings, down averaging about 32 to 34%. What we've seen since then, though, is definitely a bit of a comeback. Our sales are down now 10%. So certainly the consumer is back out and shopping, and we're seeing it across the U.S. So it isn't even just in the states that I would say are completely open. It's across the board.
Wow.
Well, that's really...
we're going to pay close attention to that.
Yeah. I mean, because, it's interesting. We've been having so many conversations, certainly here at Bloomberg, that it feels like to some extent we're flying blind when it comes to the economy. We know the past data points looking backwards are not going to be good. We get that, right? But we are wondering about what kind of a bounce back do we get on the other side? So you're saying consumers are coming back. I mean, what kind of indications are, what are they spending? And you said it's up about 10%, or what can you tell us in terms of?
Well, it's down 10% from where it was at the beginning. So we dropped, our sales were at about 70%. They dropped 32-ish. Then they've come back. Now they're down 10% from what they were pre-pandemic. So that's a pretty big swing. What I would say is, it's the things you're reading about. We were talking earlier, I was at the Bernstein conference, for instance, power sports. We're not big in power sports, but our power sports sales are up 100%. So people are buying things that they can play with at home. And we're seeing things related to the home be very strong, whether that's home furnishings or things that people are doing to fix up their homes. So we're certainly seeing strength there. We were talking about bicycles, adult bicycles you can't really get.
Right.
Sold out. So it's really been, I think what's happening with the consumer, there's a couple of things we believe. One is people have given up vacations. They're staying at home and planning to stay at home. So they're fixing up their homes and doing activities around the house with their children and their families. I think, we think that's a positive, and I think that's where consumers are spending. Obviously, we have very strong online partners. We're definitely seeing online being a big part of that process as well. But honestly, I think we're probably we're probably a bit more positive than we thought we were going to be at this point when we first started out here.
Yeah,
interesting. I think there's a lot of stimulus out there, and that's something we got to pay attention to. There's still a lot of stimulus, and I think what we've been saying is we got to make it through the summer, see when that stimulus runs out, and then where do we stand? And we probably won't have a good read until third quarter.
And so, Margaret, when you think about the retail environment, obviously so many things have been shut down. You've had well-known brands go bankrupt, and some may restructure, some may never come back. What's the net effect of that for basically sort of the world at large, but also for your business, this shift to online, where I know you're very active as well, but break that down for us if you can.
Sure. I would say, look, retail has been going through a transformation for quite a while. I think the pandemic and the fact that people had to shut their doors just accelerated some of what was going to happen over time. So we're seeing that, in some of our partners as well as many other retailers that are not our partners. And I think what's happening is you're seeing retailers who are strong becoming even stronger, and I think that will continue. I do believe that there's been a lot of view that retail is dead. I do not believe retail is dead. I think people like to shop. I think we will over-retail, and I think the strong retailers will certainly survive this and probably be stronger in the end. I do think retail has to have a digital strategy as well. They need to be able to be where that customer is shopping. And I think from a customer behavior perspective, we certainly have seen a continued shift and an acceleration of people shopping digitally, and I think that will continue. So I think there are certain things that people may have never thought of buying online before, but are buying online and have gotten comfortable with that through this process, and that's going to shift consumer behavior, I think, going forward. But I do think people will still shop.
People will still shop. Yeah, I agree. I think it's a social thing to some extent, and people enjoy actually going out and feeling merchandise. And I think, maybe in New York it's going to take a little while to come back, but, until people feel safer. What are you seeing in terms of delinquencies and people's ability to actually pay their credit cards?
So this is probably one of the more interesting things that we're trying to figure out. Consumers are paying their credit card. So about 75% of the customers who initially put themselves into a deferred payment status have actually come out of that and are paying their accounts. So we actually are seeing good payments right now, which is another thing that I think has us a little bit at pause to understand why is that. Now, is it the stimulus? Is it the fact that people aren't spending money elsewhere on discretionary, so they're paying their credit cards and their obligations? We have a lot of people who are receiving benefits, so is that helping? Probably all these things are helping. The other is, the big one is, people aren't driving, so gas prices are down even if they are driving, so there's extra dollars there. So right now, our performance in our book is good. We're very cautious on this, though, because we still believe that, we got to see how people come out of this after the stimulus runs out, and more importantly, what does the job market look like? How many people are still at work? I think we're still very cautious on this particular area.
We're talking with Margaret Keane. She's CEO of Synchrony Financial. She's on the phone from Connecticut, where the company is based. Margaret, it's interesting what you said, that statistic, 75% of customers who put themselves in a deferral payment status have come out of it. Are they paying off their balances and spending?
Some are paying off their full balances, and some are just making what their regular payment would be, but some are paying off their balances. Yes.
Rather than spending and increasing the balances.
Yes.
Right.
So we're seeing our balances come down as a result of that.
And so,
that I think has surprised us a bit, because I think we just didn't, we have models for all kinds of recessions. Right. We don't really have a model for a pandemic and consumer behavior in something like this. And I think, I guess a positive of this is those who have gotten stimulus are being thoughtful about it, and possibly using that towards their payments. But I think the real test is going to be, once we get through all of that stimulus, it's not there anymore. How many people are employed, and what does that look like? So that's why I'm saying what I'm saying is great now, is good now, but I'm being very cautious because we think there might be another side of this.
Right. And so, Margaret, when you think about sort of changing behavior going forward, just getting right down to the nitty-gritty of someone, a human handing another human a credit card, all of a sudden something we never thought about, we're thinking about more and more. The very few times I venture out, I think about that. I think about who's touching my credit card. Are there technologies that you're working on that change the nature of how we behave going forward, given that we are thinking so specifically about literally every single thing we touch?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think people don't want to touch anything. And even when I do go out, if I have to hand my card to someone, I actually wipe it off after I come home and wipe on it, because I think you have to, based on what all the experts are saying. Look, I think the technology is actually available, so I think we're looking at doing more contactless cards where you don't even have to insert it, or you just tap it by the actual machine. What really has to shift here is, and I'm sure you see this particularly in smaller businesses, they need to change their point of sale. So I think more businesses are shifting to that. In some cases, some of the regulation that's been passed in some of the states is you have to do contactless. So I've even seen in the little stores I shop in here in the town that I live in, people have made changes to their point of sale. So I think that's going to continue to happen. The technology's there. It's just a question of accelerating the use of that technology.
So how does that all impact you? And I also think, like in my household, we hadn't signed up for Apple Pay, but because of this environment, we're thinking, okay, less back and forth transactions where we're giving a card or doing something. We really have been thinking about this in a big way. So if more people move to platforms like that, how does it impact Synchrony?
It doesn't really, because we can do all those. We can do Apple Pay. We're in Apple Pay today, so you can use Apple Pay. You can use Samsung Pay. But I think also, MasterCard, Visa, the big associations are actually moving to contactless credit cards themselves. So it could be a digital wallet. It could actually be the physical cards that's contactless. So, for instance, we're preparing for the future. We put in an order for plastic that's going to be only contactless capable, so that we're ready to roll when we reissue cards and do things like that, because we think, as you said, people are not going to want to touch different point of sale.
Margaret, one of the things that we've talked a lot about on this program, and I think we're all learning in a very profound way, is that while the virus doesn't discriminate medically in many ways, it does discriminate economically and socioeconomically. And the impact of this on all of our lives is really different depending on what you earn and sometimes what your gender is in many cases. What have you identified and what do you think we can do about it as we start to assess the impact that this has had societally and especially when it comes to the economics of it?
Yeah, I think what's happened in this pandemic, it's really bringing to light many of the issues, social issues that have existed out there for quite a while, whether it's, you mentioned New York City, they didn't close schools soon enough. And, one of the reasons is because 85% of the students there receive at least one or two meals there a day, right? So they knew that closing creates this other issue. And I think for us, it's really about how do we continue to drive our diversity and inclusion initiatives inside the company? How do we take a stance in certain areas where we're going to lift people up, making sure we're paying good wages, making sure, we're doing all the right activities. For us, for instance, we've been really, really focused on what I call overall wellness, and we've been doing a lot for our employees in that area. We have diversity networks, and so we've been doing some extra work groups with our webinars, if you will, with our folks in both the African American, Hispanic, and even we have a Native American network, which, as you know, that group of folks have also been hit very hard. So we're trying to make sure that education availability inside our company is really very focused on those groups to really help them, get the right support they need.
But what about, I think about, if you look at store cards, I think the average rate on it is, 20% or more. I mean, and I do wonder about when we think about the vulnerable folks that are part of our society, often need to do a card because that's how they can afford things. But those rates often really make it difficult for them. I wonder, because of what we're seeing and as a result of the pandemic, how you guys might be rethinking some of that strategy. And I understand, you've got a business to run, but I do wonder how you think about something like that.
Yeah, I think, we always take the rates and the process that we do into consideration whenever we're originating new accounts. I think part of how this works is really the mechanism of the rewards that people get on the card and how you pay for those rewards. If you look at most of our rewards, they're richer than what a general purpose credit card would be. And, we pay close attention. And, we've changed. I think there's a little bit of a misconception that private label credit cards are mostly subprime. That's actually not true. We've changed our book dramatically from the last recession, and our book is much higher FICO than it was back then. It's I would say mid-prime type of customers who, to your point, do need these cards. And we think we manage those cards well, and we treat our customers with great respect. It's important for us to support the brand, and when we do get customers who are in trouble, we definitely are trying to do the right thing to help them along the way.
And so, from a very practical perspective, Margaret, how does your company specifically get back to the office? Where I'm very sensitive about saying, back to work, because we know everybody's working hard in many ways. But what does the office look like for you? I believe you're probably not coming back to work until at least September. Is that right?
Yeah, we put September out there. Look, I think we're going to be very cautious about this. I think it's just responsible to make sure we have the right protocols in place before we even think about putting people back in the office. I do think the mix of people in office versus at home is going to dramatically change for us. I think we've learned through this process that we can work from home, and I think probably the one area that to me has been really fantastic to see is, we moved all our call center folks to work at home. Wow. We had a subset of people who were working at home before the crisis, but we pretty much were able to move everybody home. And look, we're going to be thoughtful. We're going to start out with volunteers. We're going to test our processes. But I would say in general, I think we'll have a lot less people in our offices and more at home as we go through this. So we're looking at our footprint, what makes sense. I mean, an important part here, and this is the part I think that's unknown right now that we've got to figure out, is how do you keep your culture? How do you keep your identity? How do you make sure people are feeling belong to something bigger? And how do we make sure we have those processes in place? Now, we had that in place for the 1,000 people we had working at home. It's very different when you have 17,000 people working at home. So, we want to make sure we're doing this in a thoughtful way.
I have to say that was the number one thing that came up on a conversation I had with CEOs earlier today. It's all about culture. Like, how do you keep that going? Yeah. So it's interesting to hear that from you as well.
All right. Margaret Keane, thank you so much. Really good to catch up with you, the CEO of Synchrony Financial, joining us on the phone from Connecticut. One of these companies, we've been saying this all afternoon, Carol, in some ways used to be part of GE. Everybody, so many people touch this company and vice versa. So getting her insights into the consumer, I think was interesting. And I have to say, some of the stuff she said surprised me on the upside.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. In terms of, consumer spending and where people are committing money at this point. A really great conversation. Check it out on our podcast. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week on Bloomberg Radio.
Let's get out to Ed Baxter now on the West Coast. He's got your world and national headlines. Hey, Ed.
All right, Jason. Hey, President Donald Trump says he is signing an executive order to take action against social media companies, mentioning Twitter expressly, which he claims is censoring posts.
My executive order calls for new regulations under Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act to make it that social media companies that engage in censoring or any political conduct will not be able to keep their liability shield. That's a big deal.
Now, it isn't immediately clear exactly what the order will do, if anything. He says he will also instruct the FCC and FTC to look into monopoly laws and regulations. Now, remember, this comes from Twitter putting up links to be able to fact-check the president's tweets. It did not take them down. Mark Zuckerberg today seems to somewhere down in the middle regarding Facebook.
Just because we don't want to be determining what is true and false, doesn't mean that that politicians or anyone else can just say whatever they want.
So whether that explains what he plans to do or not, Zuckerberg on CNBC and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says this is all a Trump distraction.
It's a distraction. I opened this meeting talking about testing, how it's going to save lives, open our economy, send our kids back to school, save lives, and the rest. We're talking about Twitter.
Now, President Trump says he will hold a news briefing tomorrow regarding China, which has pushed toward the next step of new security measures for Hong Kong. New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio says he hopes to enter into phased reopening the second week of June. And the governor, Andrew Cuomo, weighing in on masks yesterday, saying they're cool, says today people must wear masks into stores where the order demands.
You don't want to wear a mask? Fine. But you don't have a right to then go into that store if that store owner doesn't want you to.
In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter. This is Bloomberg.
For the Jewish Communal Fund, Noel Spiegel, former senior partner with Deloitte & Touche and past JCF president, discusses the advantages of a donor-advised fund over a private foundation.
There's a lot involved in having a private foundation. You need to engage attorneys, you need to engage accountants, file tax returns. At JCF, all of that is done for you. You don't have to get involved in anything other than making your contribution to your fund and then determining which grants that you want to make.
A JCF fund may be opened with a minimum $5,000 contribution of cash or appreciated securities and can be used as an alternative to or together with a private foundation.
If you have a foundation, you have to list all of the contributions that you made. Potentially anybody, because the information is public, can find out exactly which organizations a foundation has made charitable contributions to.
Let JCF simplify your philanthropy and protect your privacy. Learn more about JCF's private client group at jcfny.org.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong.
Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
This is a message from the government about the next stage of controlling coronavirus with NHS Test and Trace. To protect your friends and family, testing and tracing must become a new way of life. If you have symptoms, you need to get a test immediately. Don't leave home for any other reason. If you test positive, we will contact you to trace people who you might have infected. From now on, if you're told you've been exposed to an infected person, you must self-isolate for 14 days. Play your part and do the right thing so we can safely return to a more normal life. Go to nhs.uk or call 119. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
This is Mike Tirico, introducing you to Sports Uncovered.
When I lose the sense of motivation and the sense of to prove something as a basketball player, it's time for me to move away from the game of basketball.
Quote unquote, I'm back.
I'm back. The two-word facts from Michael Jordan announcing the most famous comeback in NBA history.
That's the most impactful 2 words ever.
Search Sports Uncovered to listen on TuneIn today.
Okay, here we go.
With the NFL draft in the books and the schedule set, check out a TuneIn podcast for daily updates on the lead up to the 2020 season. Like the Ringer NFL show, where a rotating cast of Ringer experts talk with players, coaches, and special guests about the NFL landscape.
A lot of the other teams that we consider...
Or ESPN's NFL Live.
If there are some delays because of the COVID-19...
Search sports on TuneIn to explore these pods and much more.
Wondering what to play next? Want to know what other TuneIn listeners are listening to right now? Head to the trending section under Browse to explore the most popular stations and podcasts on TuneIn today. Millions of listeners like you can't be wrong.
It's TuneIn Sports on this day. On this day in 1951, after going 0 for 12, Major League Baseball legend Willie Mays connects for his first Major League home run.
There's a drive to left. It's well hit. Way back.
Listen to conversations breaking down the moments just like this? Search sports to be part of the discussion on TuneIn. Want to relive the glory of college football?
Balls over a man, into the end zone.
Come explore TuneIn's classic game replay collection to hear ESPN's complete coverage of the 2019 New Year's 6 ball games. Don't miss your chance to re-experience the Rose Bowl, the 2020 National Championship, featuring Clemson and LSU.
There are going to be 2 champions on the field tomorrow night. There's going to be 1 team hold up the trophy.
10, plays to the 5, touchdown!
Search classic game replays to listen for free.
Let's be honest, we all spend too much of our day on social media. But at least you can spend your endless scroll time to discover new things on TuneIn. Follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to always be in the know about the best new stuff streaming in the app. From breaking news stories and live sporting events.
He does! Fabry wins it!
To standout stations and podcasts. Stay in touch with TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
World headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Lots of earnings after the bell. Dell Technologies shares surging almost 9% after reporting quarterly revenue and profit that came in better than projected on greater sales of PCs to businesses with employees working from home. Salesforce.com trimmed its annual revenue and profit forecasts, indicating that the coronavirus-induced recession has weakened demand for the software maker's cloud applications. Shares down by more than 3% in extended trading. Turned out to be a down day on Wall Street, with the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all declining. Stocks spent most of the day trading higher, but things fell apart in the final hour of trading. We ended with a loss of 6 points on the S&P 500 index, down 0.2%. The Dow down 147 points, down 0.6. NASDAQ fell 43. For NASDAQ, that was a drop of 0.5%. 10-year down 3/30 seconds, yield 0.69%. Gold up 0.6%. 17.18 the ounce. Crude up 2.3%. 33.59 a barrel. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.